Welcome to Cars on Call. I am automotive journalist Steve Schutz. I'm here with bearded trauma surgeon Dr. Stephan Moran, out of the military now, or retired Colonel, Air Force, and of course, automotive collector connoisseur expert Adams Hudson. So, Stephan, we'll start with you. What's with the beard, and what's it like being a retired colonel?
Yeah, it's great. I had this slow ride out of medicine, quit medicine in January, and then slowly transitioned out of the guard, retired August 1st, but did not find out actually until September 11th that I was retired. The minute I found out for sure I was retired, I just quit shaving, which I did when I got out of the Air Force the first time around. I just quit shaving. I don't like to shave. Ski season's coming up, so the Grizzly Adams looks good, or Santa Claus. And contrary, most people tell me I look younger with the beard, which I thought was that's a good thing. So, hey, because I'm feeling my age, but I am gonna go back into the guard under a different plan. You can go back in as a retiree called indispensability, and that'll happen in about 3 months. It takes a while. It's got to go to the Secretary of the Air Force, but I will go back in. I was having too much of a good time, but I needed to cash in on those benefits of being retired.
Are they going to make you go clean shaven if you take them up on that offer?
I'll have to shave. Yes, I sure will.
Okay.
Yeah, the
Well,
beard will come off.
It looks about right now. I mean, you're like one step this side of Unabomber, so you look pretty trim.
But I may keep the porn stash though when I do. I may. I always like the porn stash look. Yeah.
That makes one of us.
See that in a future episode. I'll take it.
Yeah. I'll just tell you that as an outsider looking in, the porn stash is not going to be universally popular.
Yes, especially in the house in which I live. Yeah, exactly. I mean, Tom Selleck and Burt Reynolds could pull off a nice mustache. And outside of those two, there have not been a lot of people in history that pulled one off really nicely.
Mustaches are much more popular with 25-year-olds now.
Oh, yeah. My daughter's boyfriend has a mustache.
But it's like a thing now. It's, it was the goatee, then it was a full beard, and now it's a mustache. So it's interesting. Adams, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm growing none of the facial hair other than what you can see with the shadow. But yeah, doing well. Have actually gone to a couple of automobile shows since we last met. A couple of them almost by accident, meaning I was in a town and somebody said, "Hey, did you realize this car show was going on?" But one very much on purpose, the Chatanooga show, which I guess we'll get to.
It looks like you're being eaten by a 5.0 there. Your Porsche 5.0.
It does.
You got the front open. It looks like it's eating you up in the front there.
I got the front open to let people know I'm in mid-process on a little job I was doing in there. And I guess I could shut it because it gives me a strange sort of shroud of Turin look with that. Waiting for that. Well, that fine German engineering. That is the car I took on two fairly good for me road trips. I often take the bigger, more comfortable car because I'm usually traveling with a partner and more luggage than that car will hold. But I'll tell you, the car that was formerly eating me has been a great road trip car. Goodness gracious, just comfortable, relaxed, fast as it needed to be, fuel efficient, safe feeling. Good road car.
Well, Steve-0 and I road tripped his new Porsche from Atlanta to Boise, and perfectly comfortable. That's this thing that, that's amazing about the 911. They've got it so dialed in. It is a GT cruiser if you want it to be. But then you can turn around and put it on the track, and you can't even the average person can't even come close to the capability of the car. It's amazing how it's got a Jekyll and Hyde personality. But yeah, and that's why they're such fantastic cars. I mean, well, shit, they've been working on it for what, 50 years? How many years now? 60 years getting it right? 60 years getting it right, and they've totally got it right.
Yeah, you massage a formula for 60 years, you're going to iron out some wrinkles.
Yeah.
But they have been fastidious about it and steady about it, and they've not deviated terribly far from the original concept. But yeah, you're right. They're a do-all kind of Swiss Army knife of sports cars.
Yep.
Yeah, Adams, your 991 and my 992 are basically the same size, and they're criticized for being too large. And my answer is, yeah, they're definitely too big until you get on the highway, and then they're just the right size. And I'd much rather take a 991 or 992 on a long road trip than I would a 997 or a 993.
Well, let me go ahead and raise my hand as a guilty party of that former group that used to say, God, those are too big, and they're bloated and bulky, and they didn't need to do that. I'm telling you, they shrink once you're in them and on the road. And it's not because of a bad use of space. They have plenty of storage and all sort of little cubbies and compartments that open up, and there's not too much of anything. But you feel right-sized on the road. I used to feel that way about my 997. I mean, I'm a convert.
So
And,
tell people tell people, you guys are talking numbers here. I know the numbers, but the years, it was the last 3 iterations where they really went to the larger body size. That started in what year?
That would have been
2012.
and a half. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah,
those are
yeah.
the bigger Porsches. And I can tell you that when we drove at the track in Atlanta, it was the first time I drove the new bigger Porsche. I
Yeah.
felt fine in it until I was worried about a tight corner with a wall hitting the left rear fenders. That was the only time that I felt like I didn't know where the rear end was because it was so wide versus the earlier Porsches with the smaller bodies, the modern Porsches with the smaller body.
Understood. And it is a pretty big difference. You park them tail to tail or side by side. You just stand back a little bit and go, my gosh, that's whatever it is, 10, 12, 15%. I don't even know what the number is, but it's a decent jump for one iteration. And yeah, at first I was a detractor, but I have been completely won over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Porsche gone Kardashian. Baby's got back.
Yeah, it looks better looking than Kim Kardashian. But hey, Chattanooga, we got to talk Chattanooga.
Yes.
I think, my sense is that this became a thing shortly after Volkswagen built a plant there. They built many Volkswagens there, including the Atlas, I think the Tiguan too. And once Volkswagen got there, there was some, Clark Gillies. Remember Clark Gillies? He was a writer for, I think, Car and Driver. And he's in charge of PR now for Volkswagen. And I think he and a couple other people created this Chattanooga Motor Show, and it's really taken off. And Adams, you went there.
I did get to go there, and we've all heard of it. I mean, it's relatively new, I'm going to say, and I should have known this. This is the fourth-ish year, maybe 5, but I'm going to say 4 years it's been going on.
Right.
And it was started or funded with the very good cause of a neuroscience research and Alzheimer's research, one by a physician whose brother was in pharmaceutical industry. So together they had a heart for this cause, plus they're automobile fans. And, there was some money there. There was sort of like some automotive interest there that was already ready and kind of parked and sort of like swelling under the surface. And then when they announced it, it originally, and there's a great shot Stephan showing about this is actually the parking lot of the Westin Hotel where we stayed. It was, I don't know if it was the host hotel or not, but there were a few hotels within downtown. And this was just right out in the parking lot, day one. And it had been a little bit more Detroit, big iron Camaro Corvette. Not saying anything negative. I'm just saying that there's been a personality shift over the last couple of years. And the Mecum auction was, of course, more domestic centered. And now it's Broad Era, owned by Haggerty, so it's more Eurocentric. And Luftgekuhlt was well represented here. And Steffi, if you just want to click through a couple of pics, we can kind of keep rolling.
Yeah, describe that. So we come to these pictures here. Describe the people that don't have pictures for us, so they can kind of get a visual.
And define Luftgekuhlt.
Yeah, what the hell? Yeah, I can't. I mean, Luftgekuhlt. What the hell?
And that would be, and I hope, did I spell that Luftgekuhlt? Yeah, I did. I think I actually spelled that right. That would be German for air cooled.
Ah, okay, cool.
So Luftwaffe, of course, the aeroplanes, but Luftgekuhlt, air cooled. And so they had a terrific representation. There is some sort of secret handshake to even get into the Luftgekuhlt. I really don't know what that is. I should be a little bit more versed on that, but it's a group within a group of people who are by invitation only. In other words, you don't just say, I'm going to be part of this. You are invited. You're an inductee. And there's a a 935, a long nose 935 there on a specially built platform. These cars were judged, and you can keep on clicking. There's a
So
90.
let's go back to the nine. This is so listeners that don't figure 935. This is what I call the. Is it correctly called the slant nose?
It is. It would have been in
Okay.
factory parlance a 505 option car for street.
Okay.
Steve, I bet you probably have you could weigh in on this and talk intelligently about what we're looking at there.
Well, the 935 was basically the best evolution of the air-cooled 911 turbo. And they started racing it when their other cars kind of were eliminated from competitions. The 917 couldn't race because the engine was too big. The 936 kind of snuck in there and could race at Le Mans, but not a lot of races. They couldn't race that. So Porsche said, we're just going to take our 911 turbo and just ultimately evolve it. The thing I remember best about it was they were able to flatten the hood so it's more aerodynamic, put the headlights in the grill, basically, in the front, the very front of the car. And they did a lot of kind of sneaky things to make it competitive with even a lot of prototype cars. The funniest thing was, and this is a true story, you had to keep the rear window the same. You couldn't change the rear window. So what Porsche did was they put a whole nother rear window over the rear window. It's hilarious. Now, of course, they finally said, hey, you can't do that, but they got a couple of years out of little loopholes like that.
You know,
Wow,
the great thing about, I'm so glad you weighed in on that sort of color commentary. But the great thing is that when people do these things in racing, you know, you hear these tricks and sort of shortcuts and deviations. It's because the rule book didn't say you couldn't do it.
Right.
Right. Let me tell another quick
there's
story
our-
about the 935. It was famous because it came along during the kind of glory days of IMSA, which was sports car racing in the United States. And it was called by everyone who was in the know, the International Marijuana Smuggling Association, because many of the best racers were laundering marijuana smuggling money.
Yeah.
There were two brothers that were very colorful, very successful, Bill and Don Whittington, and they won in a 935. The only time the 935 won Le Mans, which was 1979. Of course, our former guest and your friend Adams, Dick Barber, came in second, and he should have won. But of course, the Whittington brothers cheated, of course. Anyway, the funny story was that one of the Whittington brothers wanted to start the race, and their co-driver was a better driver, the very famous Klaus Ludwig. So the Whittington brothers said to the owner, hey, we want to start the race. And the guy said, no, I own the car. The only way you can start is you buy the car. And they said, how much? He said, $200,000. They said, we'll be right back. They went to their motorhome. They brought back $200,000 in cash.
Yeah.
And they started the race. Now, where do you think the cash came from?
Yeah.
Oh, who could imagine?
Oh, that's hysterical.
Steve, I'm telling you, you just told that story paragraph by paragraph exactly as it was told to me in the bar rather late on Saturday evening by a guy who drove at that race. We'll see a photo of him later, but that is apparently very, very true.
And funny.
Yeah, and funny.
Yeah.
And by the way, we don't think Dick was part of the other initials of the MS part of the IMSA. He was trying to play by the rules, and you know, he felt like he got snubbed as a result of that. But that's just what happens, you know. Racing is what it is. And there's Steve, is that a 956 we're looking at?
Yes.
Yeah, you know, there's a 956 or 962. They look exactly the same.
Okay. And so all these, that's the hotel in the background, and Porsche was super well represented. A few other marks, they were not the featured mark, but I think it's just because Luftgekuhlt said, hey, we'd love to be part of this. And they were openly embraced. And these cars, again, they sat non-judged. They were just sitting there, static displays. They did start them up on Sunday, but it was pretty fantastic to walk out of your hotel room at 7:30 in the morning with a hot cup of coffee and see this.
Oh my gosh. I got to go next year. It's not that far away.
Well, and I'll tell you another thing as we keep kind of scrolling through the beauty shots here, and I'll quit just like giving like side detail of the show, but for any who have been to bigger shows, like you go to Monterey, you go to Amelia Island, you go to Heels and Wheels, you go to these other shows, you're parking and walking, and then you're parking and walking, and then you're going somewhere else and parking and walking. I never moved my car at this event.
Oh, that's
I gave it
fantastic.
to the valet. He put it underground. We walked everywhere you're gonna see. It's all very accessible. And that to me made it like, I don't know, just infinitely sort of, you could, hey, let's go back over to the American section. Let's go to the Italian section without thinking, oh, now I have to like regroup people and tell them where I'm going. And I don't want to break off in case something else happens. But so there's a 904 sitting there right out front. Steve,
think
if you
it's
got
the
any
Ingrams.
comments, say that again.
I think it's the Ingram's 904.
I think it is the Ingram's 904, which is the one that just got best of show at the National Parade that was in Birmingham. I did not see them with it, and I should have remembered that number, but I think that is the Ingram's 904. And that was in the middle right out front. So keep going. And here
Yeah.
we've got same car with the
Red trim, yeah, I'm sure.
yeah, with the red mask up front. Yep. Great looking car. When Porsche was sort of considered only a form over function sort of company, and all their hardware looked like it was, built out of war armaments hammered to become race cars, this was a car that would qualify as beautiful.
What year was the 904?
That would be early 60s. I'm going to say 62 to 4. Steve, am I close?
It's gorgeous.
I think it's probably 63 to 5 or 6. And then they started doing the 906 and 907, then 908, 910. So yeah, I think you're right. 62 to 64 sounds right.
In that zone. Okay. Keep rolling.
Would that technically be described as a mid-engine or rear-engine vehicle?
That is fully mid.
Fully mid, okay. It's
Yep,
gorgeous.
Yep. And you can see those vents under the hood. It's funny that a company who could draw this, and I'm not dissing the 914, but a company who could make a mid-engine car that looked like this, and then come out with a 914 that looked a little bit like a Samsonite suitcase with the motor in the middle.
Yeah.
But they knew mid-engine technology, and this is, I believe, Bali Blue on a 73, because it says 2.4 back there, 911E, which it's hard to read that in my terrible photograph. But so that would be a injected 160 horse 2.4 car, and just looking spectacular.
We need to see more blue cars on the road. This is a gorgeous blue. It's not metallic if you're not watching on YouTube, but it's kind of like a darker Mexico blue almost, but it is beautiful blue. I'm so tired of grays, blacks, and whites on the road.
I think
Oh my
we've all
gosh.
ended, and you're starting to see that in the auction results and sales results. And I agree with you. That's a great blue.
That is a fantastic blue.
And then we jump over to some oddball things, and I would like to put in a little promo plug for the Lane Motor Museum in Nashville, Tennessee. Have either of you guys ever been?
No, I ain't never known anything about it.
Well, okay. Well, I got 2 earfuls a couple different times during this. So this is called a Gregory, and we don't need to dwell on what a Gregory is, other than it was a one-off made by an American guy who sort of was influenced by the look of a Kaiser Darren.
I was going to say Kaiser Darren, exactly.
And you would good call. You would think that this is a front engine car, but and you'd be right. But what he chose to put up front was a Porsche 356 air-cooled 4-cylinder up front. And so they're these quirky, one of one, never heard of them, and they hardly got off the ground, but they were beautiful or of some merit. That's what the Lane Motor Museum is. It started off as more micro cars. A guy named Jeff Lane started it, and he was all fascinated with microcars, just the stuff of the post-war 50s and such that BMW and Isetta and Fiat and all these other companies were doing. And then he got into just, all you can say is quirky and oddball, someone's genius idea in their basement that they sort of pulled off to a greater or lesser degree. I'd never heard of a Gregory in my life. And they had 4 or 5 cars that you just look at them and go, I don't have any idea what that is.
The one in the top right, same thing in the same picture. And was this Gregory? Is that a glass car or was that a
Yes.
hand beat? Oh, it was a glass
Yes.
car. Okay.
Yes.
There were a lot of glass, one off, two off during that time.
Yep, there were. And because people were starting to understand what fiberglass could do. And they, at the time, they weren't terribly wrong, but the Corvette had just sort of like popped out with it and they went,
Right.
oh my God, we can do this. They were making boats and automobiles and they thought this is the future. Nobody's ever going to like press a car out of steel again. They felt like this is the thing. And so lots of artisans and great techniques and good eye for aesthetics, were emerging in this time. The Gregory probably wouldn't win a lot of beauty contests, but there's several that would. I mean, there's several that you look at them and go, why didn't that catch on? And then just scrolling on down, this is an entirely different area. And it looks like this Ferrari sitting all alone. And it was because it was early. But by show day, Sunday, this is like late Friday, there were 60 Ferraris all clumped up together, a couple of 275s. Sorry, I don't have photos of that. GTC era stuff, Enzo era stuff, but this 550 Maranello sitting out there in, I think it was Nart blue, like the car I used to have. And that's coming. That's a car that is certainly coming.
I just love two-door coupes, as the English would say. It's I think the GT is underappreciated. So the Grand Touring cars, these are the cars that really are just made for comfort going, and you can push them to the limit, but it's not a race car on the road. But I think that you're right. The GT, this 550 Maranello is right up, and it's got that nice brown interior.
Yeah,
I like it. I like it a lot.
Same.
All right, let's go to your next picture here.
And that was just a 914 Ford, just sort of hanging outside the hotel that had been impeccably restored. I don't have an interior photo, but it's got the tartan plaid interior. I'm going to call this, for the viewers without the benefit of visuals, a 73, because it's got the part rubber, part chrome front end. It's got the round fog lights, which is what Porsche called the appearance group. It's got, I can't remember what those alloys are called, but either Fuchs or Burmeisters, regardless, it's got a lot of options on this car. And it just looks fantastic. And it had eyeball all weekend long. I mean, this is not like it was lonely and nobody really noticed it. I mean, this car had traffic and people interested in it all weekend.
What color blue is that, Adams?
I'm going with Bali once again. And
Bali, another
tell me maybe
blue.
It's not. What do you think?
I thought either that or Maritime, but I think Maritime's too kind of weird. I think it probably is Bali or something like that. Who knows? It's nice.
Ah, oui,
for you, Stephan.
monsieur.
Here we-
Bien
yeah,
sûr,
yeah,
le chevaux, fantastique.
I was thinking of you when I took this
Yeah.
photo, and the funny thing to me, and I'm gonna let you comment on it. So we're gonna scroll through two real quick, and then Steph can come back and admit his secret love affair with that car. That the Deuchevaux was right next to this Shelby, and I just thought it was
crazy.
comical side by side.
I mean, these are two of my most favorite cars in the whole world, too. My mother had a Deuchevaux, and my cousin Gonzague had a Deuchevaux, and we go to France. I remember riding around in his Deuchevaux. I mean, these cars, I mean, they're just unbelievable. They weigh nothing. They've got this tiny motor. They roll side to side. The top just rolls down like a big sheet of canvas. But I absolutely love the Deuchevaux. And that is a gorgeous, that is a 100-point restoration on that one.
You should have put a sign up, Adams. You put a sign up next to those two cars called Colonel's Corner.
Colonel, yeah.
Exactly. Yep, he'd have taken either or both. I guarantee you they were beautiful to look at.
Yeah, then of course the Shelby GT, I think it's a 500. I can't quite see, but it looks like it's actually that has a modern motor in it.
I was waiting for you.
Yes, wait a minute. This
Yeah.
is not this is a resto kind of rodish, but hey, I still like it. Yeah, not just now seeing that's a brand new motor in that car.
I think it started life as a 69 GT350, and back in the day that was yanked and cut. And I think that's a Coyote motor. Can you tell by the
That's a Coyote motor.
Okay. But it was well done. And for all intents and purposes, if the hood were shut, it looked bone stock.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I of course like the original better, but a tasteful application of Botox and a good breast enhancement, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Nothing like some aftermarket parts.
I think that's what you got here.
Yeah.
And this was just an interesting tale. You may have read it online about,
Countach, yeah.
there you go, but not just any Countach. Did you read the story of the founder of Chick-fil-A, Truett Cathy? His
No.
son was, and you wouldn't think that there would be enough flamboyance in the Truett Cathy world, kind of known as conservatism, politically, business-wise, and other, would have ever owned a Countach.
You're
But
kidding me.
he did.
I'm shocked.
His son went on a mission to find the one originally owned by Truett Cathy. And the son found it, and this was the car. And I just couldn't resist that close-up of the Pirelli P7s and what later became the phone dial wheels and the sort of way overdone 80s. You talk about some Botox. We got a little overdose here.
Look at that
It's,
flare.
it's easy to find that car. I don't know why it took so long. You just find the only Countach that never drives on Sunday. That's it.
Never driven on Sunday. And there it is, and all that sort of garishness, but it was just so sexy to look at.
They just
love
take
it.
your, I mean, to this day, I mean, I think, we're the age where we all had this poster of that in the test drive show, but the Countach, it just takes your breath away at its outrageousness.
Yeah.
Everything about this car is so outrageous.
Yep.
And I especially love the ones with the periscope.
I don't know if you guys have seen this on Instagram, but Simon, I'm blanking on his last name. I can't believe it. Anyway, he's very British and he sells
Simon Cowell.
Kidston.
Kidston. Yes, thank you. Simon Kidston has my favorite one in the world. And it's purple with a white interior and the license plate says 77 UFO. I love that.
God, that's so good.
That's really good.
And this is sort of a little flirtation shot or two of the Jaguar section, which was its own section because they were the featured mark. And this is impossible to tell with the filtering of the light that was going on. But this was opalescent gunmetal metallic, which was an optional color in those years. And it's just a terrific looking E-Type.
Jaguar E-Type for listeners.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. Series 1 car with the lights above the bumper and all that fun stuff. And
There is no more beautiful car, T-door convertible in my mind than the Jaguar E-Type. It is just everything about that car is just unbelievable. You open the hood and you've got the straight six with the polished dual overhead cam. Everything about you look at the dash with all the flip switches and the gauges. It's just, this car is just so refined 60s automotive engineering, the wire wheels, everything. I can't say this car, every time I see one, I'm like, oh my God, that's just it. It's just unbelievable.
well, Jaguar was on top of the world, and this is a little bit foreshadowing as well that they had so much going right. They almost couldn't make a mistake, and just keep rolling through those. They were doing everything right. They sort of got the 90s into them, and the XJ220, which that's the motor of. Sadly, I think I have like one shot of the exterior. But Jaguar was hitting on all cylinders, at the time. But they made multiple management missteps. Probably a little bravado or ego got to them, and just things changed. And keep scrolling, because this is the broad view. We'll not dwell too long on that. There's a broad view of the broad view. So formerly a Mecum auction, a lot of European stuff, fun stuff, air-cooled 911s, Mercedes in the background, race cars, old one-off weird Euro stuff. And there's one of two white on black 993s there that did astoundingly well in the auction, low mile cars, like 30,000 mile cars. And keep on rolling, see if I have one more of that. Oh, and there's just the personalities that sort of make you trip with wow. Of course, we dwell on the hardware, but there's David Hobbs is basically second from left and front. And there's Hans Stuck on the far right. And they were nothing but just, and that's the other folks are the people I was with over the weekend, but it's just you know, the stories don't stop, and the whole intertwining of cars and money and power and racing and manufacturers that did good, bad, or indifferent over the years just made it worthwhile. And
Who is the giant lurking in the background?
he is a giant, and he's a giant of a personality. And that gentleman is named Tate, and Tate is a car connoisseur, mostly a Porsche guy, and he knows everyone. He is gregarious as they come. He's friends to about anybody he meets, and he was a little bit of the electricity that sort of kept the spark going all weekend long.
Wow.
Good dude out of Atlanta.
All right, we're gonna have to move on.
Oh,
Stefan, do you
yeah,
have you have a safety segment?
I do have a safety segment.
Okay.
I don't no pictures, but I do want to talk a little bit of safety because some things have happened here recently with National Highway Traffic Safety Administration.
By the way, hate to just make a sudden stop because I want to go to Chattanooga too, but
I'm going next year.
we're running a
yeah,
little
let me
bit
just
over.
say that whole buildup was a promotion. You need to go.
I'd
Yeah,
love
we
to.
we need to go.
All right, Stefan.
All right, safety segment. So looking at my retired dad bod in the mirror reminded me of an article sent to me from our avid listener and former guest, Jeff Bank. Like my bloated midsection, there's an author by the name of David Zipper who writes a lot on Slate, and he talks about car bloat. And on the show, I've talked a lot about in the past vehicle size mismatch, we call that aggressivity, as well as the impact that the increasing larger vehicles on our roads and highways have had, specifically SUVs, light trucks and vans, LTVs that have had on pedestrian fatality rates. And right now, 4 out of 5 vehicles purchased in this country are SUVs or light trucks and vans. So, I mean, they really are. And you can look around, they're all, you see, everywhere you see is a gray, black, or a white SUV or Ford 150 with occasional Chevy and Ram in there. So it's worth revisiting. And the reason why is 2022, there were 7,805 pedestrians killed. That was an 83% rise since 2009. I mean, 83% rise. That's
Since
huge.
when? 2000 when?
Since 2009.
Good
So, yes.
God.
So,
It's
yeah,
fast.
that's fast. That's a 40-year high.
Wow.
And we know that I've already talked about these studies, but SUVs and pickups are 40% more likely to kill a pedestrian. I mean, you just look at them, you can see. Would you rather get hit by a Honda Accord or Suburban? I mean, it just makes sense. You're more likely to die because if you get hit by the smaller car, you may roll up over the hood, across the windshield, off the back, hit the ground. You get hit by a Suburban, you're going 0 to 30 to 0. I mean, you know, your speed is going to change instant. You're not going to roll over. You're going to be slammed forward. And the other thing about these SUVs and LTVs is they have gigantic A-pillars. An A-pillar is if you look at your windshield, it's the piece of metal, the arm that comes up to the left side of the windshield. And they have to be big because they have to survive. They have to be able to pass the rollover test. So you got a monster vehicle like that. It's going to have a giant A-pillar structurally so it can meet the rollover requirements. Well, a TV station was looking at this, and I've talked about this before. We talked about the Carolina squat. But they put a mom in an SUV and they lined up 9 toddlers sitting on the ground in front of her SUV. She couldn't see any of them. So, you know, you think about it, you're high up, you've got a long hood, you're a small individual, you've got no visualization in front of you. Well, Europe has been way ahead of addressing this issue. Europe's always kind of had a thing against SUVs and LTVs. They don't have light trucks and vans like we do over there. SUVs are kind of making a little bit more over there. You'll see more and more. But in their crash test, they evaluate how the front end impacts with pedestrians, including they look at how the adult's head, child's head, and adult's legs all are affected by being struck by one of these. European has way more pedestrians, more pedestrian friendly. So they've already have rules that regulate how vehicles must be designed. And one of the simple rules is that there has to be basically 8 inches of sheet metal. It has to be 8 inches of space between the sheet metal and anything underneath. So you have a 8-inch crumple zone. Well, in the U.S., as always, we're like, nah, we'll just figure out some technology to go with this. So in the U.S., we have advanced emergency braking systems, emergency lane keeping systems, And now we were looking at how to modify this software for passengers as well. But the Europeans already have all this. They've mandated all these different safety features. We haven't done it yet. And then, right now we're seeing a lot of vehicles equipped with brake assist systems. A lot of people don't like them because they are braking when they don't need to. But in Europe, you have to have the brake assist system. So they have the pedestrian advanced brake assist systems. Well, our National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is finally waking up, and they proposed new rules requiring car makers to ensure that the front ends do not create excessive risk of pedestrian head injuries. Well, a little bit late to the game, but at least you're moving in the right direction. But this is going to be the first time that NHTSA has demanded automakers to adjust the shape of their vehicles to mitigate injury. I mean, that's so this is really a huge step on NHTSA's standpoint. I think it's late coming, but I do applaud the effort, and they need to get on it. But of course, U.S. manufacturers and all the lobbyists in Washington are crying foul. They said, we don't need this. We can have emergent technologies as the solution. Yeah, thank you very much, Elon Musk. Autopilot, it works fantastic. Bullshit, of course, on that. We've shown that technology isn't foolproof. I've talked about all the different studies with the autopilot where it fails. And this is another area we don't need beta software to catch up with the right thing. How about a few structural changes and then figure out the software? But it's probably not going to happen. So pedestrian automatic emergency braking systems will be required by 2029. We do know that these systems decrease deaths by 25%. But here's the problem. We got to think about this. So you have to think about Europe versus America, right? In America, the details, the devil's in the details, the fine print. These systems only deploy up to 37 miles per hour. But in America, half of deaths of pedestrians occur on roads with 45 mile per hour and higher speed limits. So it's great technology, right? But in America, we have, rarely do you even see a 35 mile per hour speed limit. These systems will have no benefit and no effect because people are going too fast.
Stefan, before you roll on, why would there be a ceiling on the speed limit of pedestrian blocking?
What they're worried, I am just having to guess here. It has to do with our roadways. Europe has much more traffic calming laws than we do. So when you come into a town, you're going under 30 miles an hour. They've got curbs everywhere. They've got one-ways. They've got roundabouts. Look at America. You go into town, there is a 6-lane road in the middle of town with a 35 mile per speed limit with a pedestrian cross zone.
Gotcha.
So I will say that, I live in Boise, Idaho, and we have a lot of traffic calming that's been built into the city over the last 3 years.
Well, you've got a university there too, which helps.
Yeah, university helps. I want to say this, and I've said this before, Stefan, part of the responsibility, and I'm not talking about most cases, but a lot of cases, part of the responsibility is the pedestrian.
Yeah.
I was in Europe recently, and I saw two things. Number one, here you see people on their phones all the time when they're driving. I saw a video recently of a woman in traffic playing Candy Crush on her phone, and she was driving. But not just, and in Europe, you don't see that. People are not on their phones when they drive. Number two, in Europe, people don't walk looking at their phones. Right. Here, they do. So I think pedestrians are on their phones and the drivers are on their phones.
Yeah. I mean, there is a very big difference between driver discipline and pedestrian discipline in America versus Europe. And it's enlightening to go over and drive in Europe, and their traffic calming and roundabouts decrease congestion. It's unbelievable how easy it is to get around in Europe. Our traffic lights with the 6-lane road screws up traffic and it gets backed up everywhere. And the other thing I just want to quickly mention for the Chatanooga geeks out there, is Tesla has been all about cameras. Well, these cameras don't work very well at night. Okay. LiDAR is what European is going to, which is the low intensity radar. But 75% of pedestrian deaths occur at night. So all these camera-based systems are basically going to be worthless. So, we're moving in the right direction, but, once again, I think the lobbyists are going to have a hard time with this. But in America, just like me, our cars are all getting boolat. I mean, it's blowed up like a toad.
Yep.
So I'm putting on weight as I have another birthday coming up here in a week, and our cars too. But Europe is amazing. You don't see it. I mean, the cars are just not big over there. They pay so much money for gasoline that they're like, they don't want a giant vehicle.
Things you notice on the road, Steve's noticed on the road in Europe, you see a whole lot more fast station wagons as opposed to SUVs. Just something about sitting 2 or 3 feet higher than traffic is not that appealing. You know, if everybody else is door handle to door handle, it's one thing, but the feeling of superiority when you're sort of looming over everybody, it starts to create this one-upsmanship that, hey, if I want to be seen, I have to be higher, I have to be wider, I have to be longer. And if you start that game, where does it stop? And I think Europe really didn't start that game because they have very diminutive parking spaces. They have very narrow streets, and they sort of understand efficiency. They understand efficiency better than we do, i.e. Fuel economy, lower silhouette. Steph, you mentioned something about the shape of the car. What is the problem with the resistance to the shape of the car? So they're trying to adopt some sort of car of tomorrow profile that everybody can live within. Why would they say no to that?
Well, take a look at all your pickup trucks and your large SUVs, your midsize SUVs. They have this giant square.
You mean the ones all shaped like a microwave?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. A box on a box, a shoebox with a shoebox. So you think about that for a pedestrian, they're going to get impacted basically up to their shoulder.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's no survivability. And we talked about it in previous shows. What you want is this. So if you're walking across the street getting hit by a car doing 30 miles an hour, you're going to go from 30 to 0. I mean, you're going to go from 0 to 30 miles an hour and then back to 0.
Then back to 0. Yeah. Yeah.
The longer that occurs, the greater that we call that the delta V, the change in velocity. The longer that it takes you to undergo those changes in speeds, the less energy that you have dissipated upon you. It's like no different. You can run into a brick wall at 20 miles an hour and come to a dead stop, or you can run into a wall of cardboard boxes at 20 miles an hour, and you will slow down much. It'll take you a lot longer to slow down. So, but with these vehicles with these very large front ends, you're being struck from basically shoulder down. Your head goes to the side. You don't have any way to dissipate the energy.
Well, Stephan, what you're talking about is a jelly bean essentially, because in order to make it work, you need to have a relatively low front that's kind of rounded, and then you need to have a hood that sits, way above the engine, so it cushions you, and then it protects you. And I know in Europe, there's even some cars that have an airbag in the hood that comes out and it protects.
Oh, wow.
So what you're going to have is a car nobody wants. Ever since the 1993 Dodge Ram, which had a big grill that looked like a Peterbilt. Remember when that came out?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Everyone was like, holy crap. Ever since that was the big bang. And since then, grills have gotten bigger and these have gotten more assertive, more aggressive, more visually aggressive. And that's what people like. The Yukon Denali SUV, big grill, very tall, very imposing is the word. Those are so popular. If you actually did what's being proposed, people are going to, I think, hold on to their old Denalis and not buy those new cars. They're not going to be attractive.
Yeah, unfortunately, but at some point in time, we have to put away our American individualism and think about the greater good.
I would, on one side, I would vote for the individualism, but then over time, I think I would vote for the greater good. It's one of those short and long range sort of things we were talking about. But, when I was driving on the road, to relate this to that recent road trip, even as big as a 991 is, when I saw a Dodge Ram or a Denali come up behind me, and it usually is didn't have to be tailgating to appear that he was tailgating. Because it's all I could see. It was a wall of grill and headlights, and it just appeared to be aggressive, no matter how much faster he was trying to go. So,
or an Escalade. It's what people want. All right. Well, let's move on to which car we are. And this is something that both of my co-hosts, Adams and Stephan, have been on Cars Yeah, which is a very popular podcast. And of course, we were very fortunate to have Mark Greene on our podcast. That was a really fun conversation. But one question, he asked the same questions, and it's either good or bad, depending on your perspective. I think it's a good thing. And one of the questions is, if you were a car, what car would you be? And he takes a lot of time, not a lot of time, but he takes time to say, hey, I don't mean like, what car do you wish you were? I mean, we all wish we were like a 1962 Ferrari GTO or a Porsche 911 Turbo S, or something cool, or a Cobra. So, but we're not. In the world, we're not. We all wish when it comes to looks, we were a 10. We're not. So this is his point. It's like, what do you think you are in real life, realistically? And I think it's a very interesting question. The first time I heard it, I thought a lot about it, and I still haven't changed my mind about what my car was or would be. And I forget what you guys said you would be as a car on the show. So Stephan, I'll start with you, because you were on the car on cars you have first, and then we'll go around the horn.
Okay, so let me pull up my pictures here. So when I was on Cars on Call, on Cars Yeah with Mark Greene, he asked this question, and I thought about it. And of course, for you guys probably figured out that at the time, I said, absolutely, I am a Cobra. And, I'm having a Cobra built. Here it is. There's me sitting in the car being built right now. But I'm older now. I'm retired. I hurt myself in my sleep, which is just, I don't know how that happens, but it does.
Amen.
I'm taking time to enjoy the finer things in life. I'm
I
slowing
pulled a
down.
ligament during this podcast.
That's what happened when you put the hood down.
Exactly. I'm a little achy.
But I've learned to appreciate luxury, things that make me comfortable. But underneath this Santa Claus beard and all this, I'm still very spirited. I'm not as quick to becoming unhinged as I used to be, but it still does happen. I still am an adrenaline junkie, but I've just decreased it because I don't like the pain associated with those activities, like breaking ribs, snow skiing. So I've changed my car, but it's kind of the same. But, I still got to have a little bit of the nastiness inside. So this is the nastiness in my Cobra. It's going to be a street Cobra with this nasty engine. But the car that I really am is this right here. This is me now. And this is a Bentley Continental GT Sport. This is the new one. And the reason I'm gone with the new one is, the Cobra, mine doesn't have side pipes. It's not the penile extension car, but I want the gentleman's car. And this to me is it. This is the Bentley Continental GT Speed. And I want the new one because I really actually, for maybe one of the first time in my lives, maybe do kind of care about the planet. So this is a hybrid. So we got rid of the W16. There's a W16, right? Yeah, no, the W12. And it's got the hybrid in it, 771 horsepower. I'll be caressed in luxury. But when I get fired up in spirit, man, this car will lay down and get nasty. This is the exact color I'd want. It's called Cumbrian Green, which is a fantastic dark green. But I would do it, instead of this gray interior, I would do a biscuit leather interior. And then I'm going to go for these gray wheels, because the chrome wheels are a pain in the ass to keep playing with all the brake dust. But these rims look nice in kind of this gray. They're not black, but they'll get a little dirty and they won't look terrible. This is how I envision myself now coming upon my 63rd birthday. But I'll have the Cobra in
Well, that's the car you want, but what is the car that is you?
This is who I would be today. This is me.
Okay.
Yep. Because, I love the Cobra, I love the Miata, I love the Mustang, but I really calmer, cooler, enjoy luxury, don't want to hurt myself anymore. And I just want to spend the next, 20 years pain-free, cosseted in luxury. But if I want to get ugly, get rowdy, this car will do it.
I think that so fits. Am I the only one that doesn't have to get too far from the screen and squint to see a bullet Mustang and the profile of that car?
Exactly.
I do. Yes. At first I thought it was it. Then I looked at the rear quarter panel, and it's not a Mustang.
It is.
But it is so dang good looking. And I think your point is well made. I was going to say well defended. I don't mean like you're being defended, but I mean, it's well made, and I think it fits. I get it.
I love my bullet, but you sit in a Bentley and you're like, oh my God. I mean, I love the Bullet, and it is where I'm at today. But if I could really, be this is more, a little Cristal champagne, some foie gras, some, some nicer
Served in the
things.
back seat.
Yeah, this is really, I've always had an aspiration for this car, and this really is where at this point in my life, Mark Greene was Cobra, then it became the Bullet, but really this is an evolution to this car.
Yeah.
This is it for me. This is who I'd be. This if I could
All
be a
right.
car, this is it.
It is
The
beautiful.
mature and refined Stefan, 2 words that I've not previously ascribed to you.
Which word?
Mature and refined.
Yeah, so I'm trying. I'm really trying hard.
And hybrid.
Yeah. Oh, and
Yeah.
hybrid.
Hybrid, yes.
Yeah.
That makes a new me,
There's a few, I have a few, not arguments, but like, I don't know about that, but it is a beautiful car. I love the color. Adams, what do you got?
What do I have? I see the next photo up, and that's not what I have. But, during the Mark Greene thing, I'm pretty sure I remember what I had chosen. And at that time, I had chosen the ISO Grifo. And it's largely for the same reason as this. I'm probably not as refined as I should be now, but this is the Bizzarini 5300 GT Strata. And, it could be a little bit that I want to be seen as this, but this is
So tell people a little bit about what they can't see what a Bizzarini is.
Bizzarini, this was Ferrari's head engineer in the day and during, all the fiery times of all the fiery Italians that, constantly have love and then hate affairs with people, and they leave in horrifically elevated emotions under drama and duress. Bizzarini left Ferrari, started his own company, his eponymous company, and this was Giorgetto Giussaro, fun word to say. That was his designer who came up with this silhouette called a Bizzarini. It's a front / mid engine, and you see in that second photo, that's what it is. GT car with a Corvette motor. And I guess the essence of it is sort of a little bit of a Italian sort of like desire and enjoyment of the aesthetic that are Italian things, and then the heart of an American. And so underneath the hood of this car is that 5.3, which is where they came up with the 5300 Corvette motor. Sort of, simple and kind of basic in that regard, not as sophisticated as it might want to be on the exterior, a little unfinished. I think that would be part of it as well, as far as what I sort of see. And, I'm not really ironed out. The wrinkles are still there. The under engineering is still there. The shortcomings are still there, but there's an implied potential. And that's kind of what I would see myself as. I don't know if that's accurate, but this is the car that I most identify with and would want to be.
Well, knowing you, Adams, and for people that don't know Adams is amazingly creative. He's a designer, he's an artist, and has attention to detail that's just really very impressive. And so I see this car, but then you have to put your own touch on everything. You don't want a finished product because you're going to find some attention to detail for you to finish. Like in your Porsche buying, you sent us pictures of how you've changed the gear shifter with a shower rod, which really looks cool. So, but I can see that you've got Italian design, you've got the eye for design. This is done by a beautiful Italian designer. You grew up in America in Montgomery in the 70s with muscle cars, you had a bunch. So here you get Italian design with American reliability. It's not quite right, but Adams Hudson is going to make this car right. So to me, it's totally fitting, and I see everything in you in this car, and I think it's a great choice.
Well,
I
thank
love
you.
the choice. I think it's a great choice. A good friend of mine, Mike Clark, has had a series of these and has 2 right now.
He's kind of the Bizzarini guy. He is like
He's a really guy.
up to his
And
neck.
he's given me a real appreciation for these cars that I didn't have before. And speaking of, the whole Ferrari thing, there was basically a mutiny at Ferrari probably right around 1960. And it wasn't just Bizzarrini, but a whole bunch of senior engineers and leaders basically left Enzo on his own.
Yep.
Of course, he did okay afterwards, but it was interesting. And it shows how history really is a history of people. And if you look at individual people like at Enzo Ferrari, you see how a Bizzarrini would even come into existence. And of course, Giugiaro, he seems to have his fingerprints on every significant design in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Yep. And, Bizzarrini had left, like you said, it was a big walkout. It was absolutely a walkout. It was an exodus. It was are we turning the lights out after the last one leaves kind of thing. And he had just finished the 250 GTO. So it wasn't like he left after a bad day at work. He had achieved a whole lot and he went on his own. And I don't know, I sort of identify that with a little bit as well. Not that I'd reached any pinnacle, but I'm just saying that my life changed significantly after a decent string of achievements. And I was like, dang it, who saw that left hook coming? And so to see what he did with kind of in the rubble of his despair was like crazy inspiring. But that's a great car. All right.
I like both your choices. I went with, I just told you, Stefan, I put up a new one.
You did. Did you change personalities between emails?
Well, these are actually decent. They're actually very similar.
Wait a minute. Did I get the wrong picture up here?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let me close that out. Let me stop the share.
I had originally the E46 M3, which is it's a decent choice, actually.
It's a great pick.
Oh, here it is. Okay.
But I put the 1988 the first generation BMW M5. And the reason I picked it, the reason that I think it reflects me is you don't notice it. You don't think it's anything special, but it does have more performance than you think. I've had a pretty good performance in my life professionally, and I've done a lot, but I think a lot of people, if you would ask them, would be surprised. And a little understated, but a good performer. Like me, best days are behind me. And but still a decent car that I think if you like it and on some level admire it, has its flaws for sure, but understated performer, more performance than you think, does have flaws.
So I would say
best days behind it.
I'd say perfect because you've always wanted to fly under the radar.
Yeah.
This car flies under the radar. Remember when you joined your group, you were like, for 1 year, I'm not going to say anything or complain about anything in the first year of joining my group. Of course, the first weekend I joined my group, I was already raising hell about a bunch of stuff. So,
and you had two conduct checks.
So this car I remember when this is the very first M5 that came out. So they had not flared it out yet. The fenders were not flared. They put the bigger motor. So this was you had to know what this car was to appreciate it. Otherwise, it just was another BMW on the road.
Yeah.
4-door sedan. So I think that's a good call.
I think that's a good call too. On every single merit that we've mentioned, largely on the slow burn of appreciation that it has taken for people to recognize what the M5 was really up to back in 1988. It sort of languished. It sort of like sat alongside the normal 535 or even the 535 IS, which was a okay performer and sort of like pretended to be an M car, but the M car was way, way, way better. Well, now their values have distinguished themselves, like you said, Stephen, based on the performance and the rarity and the unusual attributes that make this car unique and just very special. And it did take a car dude to identify these in traffic. There are lots of black BMW 5 Series, but not just like that.
Well, that was fun. And, we've had rants before. I got a rant. And
Do you have a rant, Stephen?
This won't take too long, but I'm really.
The M5's going to speak up.
Yeah, I'm going to speak up is right. And I'm angry about Chrysler. And Chrysler has been damaged twice three times by foreign entities. And right now, I think it's being killed. I think it's being starved and strangled by a foreign entity. And it makes me really angry. And I want to go through a little bit of history of of Chrysler. But I think you'll see why I'm angry at the end.
Okay.
After World War II, you had the big three: Ford, GM, Chrysler. And GM was by far the biggest and the most successful. But they were all successful companies and they were American. Chrysler was a strong member of this big three until the 1970s when we had two big oil shocks, and that really hurt them. They were on their knees and they actually were days from bankruptcy until 1979. Lee Iacocca, fired by Henry Ford very famously. He was hired immediately by Chrysler, but he walked into a huge mess. He had to go to the US government for loan guarantees. He had to sit in front of Congress and beg for money. He got it. And then they came out with the minivan, the first minivan, the K car, all kinds of other cars that were huge successes in the 1980s. To be fair, they were not great cars, but they were huge successes, saved Chrysler. Chrysler became very, very successful. If you go through the list there at the top, you've got a Chrysler 300F from 1960. You got a Hemi Cuda from 1971. You had a K car from 1982. And in 1983, you had these cab forward cars that were very distinctive and very successful for Chrysler that took them through the 90s. Lee Iacocca had Bob Lutz as his number two, heir apparent. And in the late 90s, probably mid-90s, he gave the reins to an outsider named Bob Eaton, who was from GM. And Bob Eaton stayed there for about 5 years, sold it to Daimler. Big mistake. He had Daimler, Chrysler. It was a total disaster. That was 1998 when that happened. Cerberus took over in 2007, just 9 years later. And Cerberus was a private equity firm. They do what private equity firms do successfully all the time: fuck things up. And they went bankrupt in 2009. Very famously, the US government and the Obama administration sold it to Fiat for $1. Became Fiat Chrysler. The guy who took over, Sergio Marconi, had one job: turn it, shine this shit up and sell it and get it out of there so the Agnelli family could have money instead of a company. They didn't want to run the company anymore. And Chrysler was valuable because they had Jeep, Plymouth, Dodge. Well, they didn't have Plymouth anymore. Chrysler, Dodge, Ram trucks, and most importantly, Jeep. This really infuriates me. In 2021, it was sold to PSA. In 2009, it should have been merged with GM. They're both bankrupt. Put them together, they could have made a great company. Jeep and GM, they would have gotten rid of Chrysler, they would have gotten rid of Dodge, but they could have kept the Ram trucks, maybe, whatever. Sell it to GM, give it to GM. You wouldn't have lost nearly as many jobs. They would have been doing way better. Basically, it would right now be GM plus Jeep. They didn't do it. And now you have a foreign company that doesn't care. Carlos Tavares is in charge of the group that bought it, which is basically Citroën and Peugeot. And he is a European through and through. I don't think he spent more than 2 days in the US. They have been laying off thousands of workers. White collar jobs have been going away for the last 5 years. It's terrible. Now, here are their problems: low quality, too much production because they were trying to goose their numbers. And Carlos Tavares wanted to say we're super profitable after he got them handed to him in 2021. So they goosed the numbers. So then they goosed their sales by increasing production in 2022 and they look good. The profits were pretty good in 2023. Now it's all turning to shit because of poor quality and overproduction. You know what that gives you? Decreased resale value, more warranty costs, lower dealer profits, too much inventory. That has led to dropping production now. So their sales are way down. Dealers are even less profitable. Increasing fleet sales also decreases resale values, increase incentives. And they had too much investment because they're run from Europe, too much investment in electric cars. They are in huge trouble. I don't see how they survive. I am so angry about this. Everything's turning to shit. Another 1,800 white collar jobs were announced last week, job cuts. Chrysler has a minivan, that's it. Chrysler's going to die. Ram's doing okay. Jeep has a bunch of crappy cars like the Cherokee and the Renegade, and this Grand Wagoneer, which we all hate. This was stupid management, killing the company. I'm pissed off about it. They're not going to make it. I don't see any chance how they make it. There's my fucking rant.
Wow. Well, Steve, in one chapter there, when Chrysler was doing not its best, but its modern best, was Eaton the chairman when the Daimler dissolution came? Like what was that little chapter like when Daimler got out? Was that an Eaton decision?
Eaton dumped the company, and so it was a merger of equals in 1998, but it was a takeover. And
Yep,
Eaton stayed around for a couple of years as a figurehead, no power, and then he retired. It was Jürgen Schrimp was the CEO of Daimler, who wanted to diversify and not be so dependent on expensive cars. The idea was during a recession, you don't sell as many Mercedes. If you have Dodge and Ram, you'll do better and you're diversified. But he miscalculated because it's very hard to run an American company as a German when you live in Germany.
Yeah.
And there were a bunch of managers that came over and tried to do it, but they realized we can't do this. And they gave up and dumped the company in 2007.
Well, it sure has gone from a company at the forefront of engineering, excuse me, and for a brief period for design and style, like you were saying, the cab forward stuff. But, you know, when the Mercedes and Chrysler engineering got together, there was a brief glimmer of hope, like, hey, they're going to come out of this thing. They're going to be better. They're going to be more profitable. They're going to be more progressive than a lot of the domestic companies who are sort of stuck in their own backwater. But that did not happen. That was incredibly short-lived. And now it looks like Chrysler and Dodge are the companies that just sort of wait on everyone to do things, and then they follow suit 5-6 years later.
I will
The
never
truck being an example, the Wagoneer being an example, on and on and on. Go ahead.
I will never understand why anybody who knows anything about cars would have decided to give Chrysler to a European company in 2009 when they were bankrupt, as opposed to giving it to an American company,
Yep.
which was also bankrupt.
Yeah,
I'll never understand
exactly.
that decision.
Yeah, I totally agree. Different interests, different needs, different work population, and it's not going to work. I mean, American culture is the automotive manufacturing is so embedded in the automotive American history and culture, and they've done their own way in Detroit forever. Detroit has just, Ford, GM, Chrysler for years, they just did it their way. The unions and everything. I think some Europeans, Daimler failed. Now with PSA, I mean, it's doomed for failure. Or basically, they start slapping the Chrysler brand, which they do on some of the vehicles, on their vehicles, and bring them over here. But you're right, the loss, it's a big loss. I can honestly, I couldn't even tell you what cars Chrysler has on the road right now. I don't even know what they are. I know the Dodge is gone, the Challenger and Charger. The Challenger's gone away. They still got the Charger, but I mean, honestly, the Jeep I know, but I don't think I could tell you a single Chrysler car. I don't know. It's
The
kind
only
of
one they
weird.
sell now is the minivan. By the way, you want even more frustration? One of the pillars of profitability of the Volkswagen Group is Lamborghini. Lamborghini was owned by Chrysler in the 80s.
Oh, wow. Yep.
Wow.
They did the Diablo and did a pretty good job at it because they knew what they were doing. Yep. And if you look back in the deep, you're right. In the deep history, Walter Chrysler, by anyone's account, was a better engineer than Henry Ford. May not have been as great a manager or overseer of the production line, but he was a better engineer, and he was willing to try sort of experimental things, which Chrysler has it's kind of been their calling card. They've sort of broken out of the mold a little bit. Well, this is all blended in, of course, to Alfa Romeo and Maserati to a degree, and the Fiat group. I mean, it's not looking good. There's storm clouds all over that group.
Find me something that is looking good. That's my point.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we got to wrap this up because we are over time, but it's kind of
But
cool.
it's been worth it.
It's been great. And how cool to see what we are as cars.
I'll be looking for you guys on the road.
All right. Close this out, Stephan.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. And we'll come at you sporadically. But if you subscribe, you'll get a little blue dot on your service, whether it's Apple or Spotify, that we have a new episode. So please go ahead and subscribe on YouTube as well. That way you'll be notified we got a new episode. Guys, it was wonderful as always. And we'll catch you guys next time around.